Okoronkwo, again, really mad that you guys stole him from Chicago. I wanted him to be a Bear so fucking bad because I agree with Curtis. He's one of the most underrated edges in football. He's phenomenal. Alrighty, welcome everybody back to another video here on the channel. If you don't know who I am by now, my name is David. I also go by Miller Football, and I'm currently doing a series where I am talking about all 32 NFL teams, what they did during the offseason, what happened to them last season, and what our expectations are for their upcoming season. And as a Bears fan, I feel like I can't do 31 of the 32 teams enough justice covering them by myself. So I have enlisted the help of fans of all 32 teams. And surprisingly, no one decided to rep their team today, but we are going to be talking about the Cleveland Browns today. And to do that, I have three guests with me, as you can see here. If you watched my series last summer, you'll recognize James from BOTA Sports, and of course, the man, the myth, the legend, Phones down there in the bottom right corner. And then a newcomer this year is Curtis. So before we jump into this, fellas, how are we all doing today?
Doing super.
I'm really good. I'm amped. I'm amped to be back. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for coming back on.
Oh, it's so fun being back here when it takes 5 times for us to get ready and 3 attempts to record. I miss this. This is fun.
Yeah, I don't know why the past 2 years the Browns episode has been the hardest to get going.
It's a sign.
Like, yeah, it's definitely some sort of sign. But it was worth it because if we wouldn't have, or if we would have recorded earlier on, we wouldn't have been joined by Curtis, and I'm sure Curtis is going to enlighten us all with something wonderful we wouldn't have had before. Everything happens for a reason. I'm a firm believer in that. So just diving into things, starting off talking about last season and what happened with the Browns, the big story, so to speak, the almost curse that this franchise was dealing with was the whole Deshaun Watson situation, where, I'm not going to talk about what he did, but last season he came in, he didn't perform very well, was very underwhelming given, the type of quarterback he was before all of the stuff happened and given the type of capital that Cleveland gave up for him. So my first question for you guys is just, how did you feel about the whole Deshaun Watson situation last year specifically, like dealing with him underwhelming and, all the stuff that goes with that?
I mean, if I can lead off here, it's never going to feel good when you put that much capital into something and you watch it kind of sputter. But he also looked like a quarterback that hadn't played football in a year. Like it's not overly shocking, more than a year actually. But I don't know. Most we can do is look at training camp, hope and look towards the future, and see that every player apparently that we have is going to be a future Hall of Famer. That's what training camp reports tell us.
Exactly, the beauty of training camp.
Yeah, it's great. The progress is there, but I don't know. I can't take it that hard off of year one. I don't know about you guys, but
I mean, if you've ever seen a train wreck and a dumpster fire have a child, that was probably last season for Deshaun Watson. I mean, he hasn't played football in 2 years. I don't know what to expect. I mean, it's bad. It looked horrible. It's everything that we expected it to be. You step away from something for that long, you're rusty. Your timing is off. Your play calling's off. I bet he was still, working out, but working out on the sidelines versus in the game is completely different. So, yeah, I expected it.
Yeah, valid points by you two. I mean, granted, he sat out for 2 years. The rust was going to be evident. I mean, I thought when he came back against Houston, he looked like a guy who hadn't played in 2 years. He looked rough. Timing was off. Mechanics looked a little bit all over the place. He settled down once he started getting more games under his belt. But, it was underwhelming. I'm not going to read too much into it. 2 of the games that he played in, the Saints game and the Ravens game, the weather conditions were less than ideal. I understand that. But, that's going to happen when you're away from football for 2 years. The rust is going to be evident, especially if you're a quarterback. So it was a rough experience. I know a lot of people are reading too much into that. I'm not. It's a small game sample size, but, I'm not going to read too much into that when it comes to evaluating him for this season.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. I mean, there was a lot going against him for sure. You consider all the off the field stuff, new offense, different type of offense, nonetheless, very, very different from what he was doing in Houston. A lot of play action, a lot of under center, a lot of trying to fit into a scheme rather than being able to create on his own like he was doing in Houston. He didn't have a lot of opportunities to play hero ball. So there was definitely a lot going against Watson, for better or for worse. You guys know my stance on Watson, so I don't have to get into that, but it's definitely something I think a lot of people have overreacted to. You know, you start to see people rank quarterbacks and they're putting him in the low 20s and, you know, even lower than some backups and free agents. And like, while I respect the agenda, it's certainly not fair from a football standpoint to try to make those types of arguments. However, I will say shout out to Jacoby Brissett for looking better than Deshaun Watson last year. He was the real MVP for the Browns. And that's something we'll get into a little bit later here when we start talking about free agency and whatnot. But looking at the season for Cleveland as a whole, this is a team that went 7-10. They were 4th in the AFC North, 4-4 at home, 3-6 on the road, and 2-3 in their last 5 games. So pretty, you know, run of the mill. Wasn't a great season, wasn't a bad season, was pretty mid. And, you know, I'm sure as Browns fans, mid is a step up from what you're used to. And I can say that as a Bears fan, I have been there. I know your pain. Maybe not to the same extent, but in the same general grouping and whatnot. But looking at some of the numbers, specifically EPA per play, that's something I've really been focusing in on for this series. They were 6th in rushing, which is not surprising by any means. Kevin Stefanski is a run game phenom. You know, he does fantastic with his scheme and whatnot. And again, we'll get into that. Nick Chubb's arguably the most talented back in football. Makes a ton of sense. 20th in passing EPA per play, Again, with how bad Watson was, that makes a lot of sense. 30th in run defense EPA per play, could not stop the run to save their lives. 12th in coverage, a little bit better there. And then looking at points, they were 18th in points scored, 20th in points allowed, and had a negative point differential of -20, putting them at 18th in the league. So looking at those numbers, do any of them stand out to you right away or jump off the page or show you something that, you know, really stood out to you when you were watching the games last year?
Well, the run defense was piss poor. I don't need to sum it up any further than that. It was bad, and a lot of people will talk about, well, why is the reason that their run defense was so poor? The defensive line, the interior defensive line, for that to be specific about it, their interior defensive line was getting pushed back continuously on a consistent day-to-day basis, and when you have that happen, your linebackers' jobs, that makes it a lot more difficult. That that game against the Atlanta Falcons, when Arthur Smith said, you know what, we can't pass the ball, we're just going to run the ball down their throat. They couldn't stop the run at all, and it was a consistent theme throughout the season. And you can blame it on the defensive players that they had. And, like, to be fair, you can't name one person on that defensive line. You tell anyone who's on that defensive line who the Browns had, they wouldn't even get one name right. Let's be real. The defensive line was an abomination, interior-wise. Tommy Togiai was a disappointment. Jordan Elliott struggled. Perion Winfrey, who's no longer on the team because of stuff off the field, he showed flashes, but interior-wise, the defensive line was a mess. It was bottom tier. As you mentioned, it was towards the bottom in rush EPA per play. It was abysmal last year. Some of it you can blame on the linebackers because, to be fair, the linebackers were somewhat decent, but it was the interior defensive line that really sunk the Browns defense as a whole. The Browns defense had problems throughout the season, but the run defense was a major problem. It felt like every game teams were going to run the ball because they could not stop anybody. It was evident throughout. And when you look back at the film and you watch those games, all teams did was just run the ball. They didn't bother to pass the ball. The team's secondary was solid. The run defense was a big problem. Honestly, that's what happened.
No, I mean Curtis nailed it there. It was bad. I mean, we knew that going into 2022 that like the defensive tackles were our weakest point on that line. Edge rushers were fine. It was Myles Garrett and then whoever else we want to put across from him. I'd still want to put a ton of that on Joe Woods though, just not adjusting. That getting rid of him was the best move we did this offseason. I know that's a controversial take in some circles. But
that is not a controversial. Don't even start with
that. There are Joe Woods stands out there. I don't want to hear
Joe
Woods was bad. He was really bad. His inability to make a defense that's worth respectable, it was just bad. He
We
couldn't
got
really
beat
be
by
creative.
Joe Flacco. Can we stop right there? Okay. I'm sorry I had to run for a second. I left a pot pie in the oven. It was burning. But anyway, we got beat by Joe. We got beat by Joe Flacco. I think that solidified Joe Woods' career summed up in Cleveland. There's less than 2 minutes left, and it is 28-13 or something like that. We're beating him by 2 scores, and they get an onside kick and a touchdown. I mean, we're talking about Joe Flacco, who hasn't been anywhere near a Super Bowl since I was probably like 12. I mean, what are we doing here? That's it. That's all I have to say on that. That's my piece on Joe Woods. If you get beat by the Jets and Joe Flacco, I can't do anything for you.
It was just bad. It was bad from everything, from not putting the players in the right position to succeed. Just everything was a mess for that defense. And, they had to fire him because if you kept him for another year, just ask him to get fired. It was time for him to go. I mean, Myles Garrett calling him out the previous season and players openly saying that the scheme wasn't working. That tells you what you need to know about Joe Woods. I mean, It's unfortunate it didn't work out, but after week 2, I'm like, he's not surviving the season. I don't care any improvement that the team makes. He's not going to be here next year. You cannot allow that to happen. You just can't.
No, I don't want to deviate too much from it. I'm sure we'll go into this a little later, but that's the thing I love about bringing Jim Schwartz on is he's at least going to use these guys properly. My moment that I was like, Joe Woods is done was against the Chargers and watching Denzel Ward, who's, I think I have it right here, 5'11", lined up against Mike Williams. I was like, this is a disaster. And he went over the top on exactly what we thought would happen. 6 foot huge Mike Williams jumped over Denzel Ward. Not a shot against Denzel. It just was a mismatch.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing. I mean, outside of the interior defensive line, as Curtis pointed out, the Browns had a lot of raw materials to cook with last year on defense, the secondary especially, but the linebacker core had talent. You have Myles Garrett, who's arguably the best edge rusher in football. Like, there was a lot to like about the Browns defense, and it was just so piss poor. Again, Curtis nailed it on the head. It was piss poor. It was really, really bad. And I do think maybe not every bit of blame falls on Joe Woods, but a solid 95% of it is very much his fault. Because again, you can only do so much when your interior defensive line is, for a lack of better word, squishy. Because that's pretty much what it was. Like it was so easy to run on the Browns. Speaking of the staff and Jim Schwartz, moving over to some of the schematics, starting out with the defense. As I mentioned, there's a lot of raw materials to cook with on this team, especially in that secondary. It is absolutely loaded. You have Denzel Ward, who's one of the best corners in football. You have Martin Emerson, who looked great last year. Grant Delpit, if he can stay healthy, can be really good, and I'm excited to see what Schwartz is going to do with him. In this defense, it was really held back by that run defense, not just because teams ran all over them, but because teams ran all over them, they were really restricted in what they could do schematically. The Browns really relied heavily last year on cover 3 as their main coverage they would go into when they were trying to stop the run. They were 10th in the league in cover 3 calls. I don't have the exact number. But it was funny because on top of that, they were also 9th in quarters. And that's not something you usually see paired. Like, you'll see teams run both, but they're never going to be that high. And the reason for that is it really felt like wanted to be a quarters heavy defense, but couldn't, because if he went into quarters, there was no chance they could stop the run. So this is a team that, maybe they lean into that this year. They absolutely have the pieces to do so. It'll be interesting to see what the plan is there. But to double down on the defensive line, something I found really interesting is starting at about the midway point of the year after he dealt with some injuries and whatnot, this team didn't have a single nose tackle on the roster. They had 3 techs and small defensive linemen trying to 2-gap and play the nose tackle. And that's never going to work. It's just not possible to make that work. So that's another testament to how bad their run defense was. And we'll talk about how they fixed that. I think they did a really good job of remedying that with 2 moves that they made, one in the draft, one in free agency. Another guy that's going to help a lot with that, or with the run defense specifically, is za'darius Smith. And again, we'll talk about him. because the Browns really struggled to set the edge last year. And that is what Za'Darius Smith brings to the table all day, every day. He's a fantastic run defender, really good at setting that edge. So him and Myles Garrett, while he's not exactly his prime self as a great pass rusher, as a run defender, he's going to be huge. And it was a team that last year didn't get to blitz a whole lot because they were so reliant on their linebackers and whatnot in coverage. They were very stunt heavy. So just out of curiosity, I didn't have this written down, but just to give you guys the floor, do you have any expectations for what the defense is going to look like this year with the new defensive coordinator, Schwartz? I almost forgot his name for a moment.
It should be much better than what we have with
True.
Woods. I'm not saying this is going to be a top 5 elite defense. That's pushing it. There should be a top 15, dare I say top 10 unit. You went out in free agency. You got a free safety in Juan Thornhill. The days of John Johnson playing free safety are over with. You upgrade the defensive line. You picked up za'darius Smith by trade. You picked up Okoronkwo from Houston, a very underrated pickup. You picked up Dalvin Thompson to help beef up the interior. You drafted Siaka Ika in this past draft. So the pieces are there. The question is, can they come together at the right time? I expect some growing pains. Learning a new defense, it's going to happen. I don't expect this team to be this defense to be elite right off the bat. There's going to be growing pains. I expect that. But at the end of the season, I expect this defense to be a top 10 defense in efficiency, run defense, pass defense, you name it. It will be night and day when it comes to what Jim Schwartz is going to do and what Joe Woods had. When it comes to the packages that he's going to scheme up, the NASCAR package that I'm hearing about with Garrett, za'darius Smith, Okoronkwo, and I believe that I'll say Smith. Yeah, I probably did. Another person there. But he has all the tools to just make this defense much better and much more organized. And when it comes to that, you have a defense that's capable of being really good. The Browns defense last year was below average. The run defense was terrible, but the pass defense was pretty solid. The question is that I have is, can this defense hold up against, Cincinnati's offense? Can you hold up against Lamar Jackson and that rushing attack? Can you hold up against Seattle's passing attack with DK, JSN, and Tyler Lockett when they play? I'm curious to see how they match up because this defense is talented. You got talented pieces. It just needs to come together. You got the guy in Jim Schwartz to lead this defense. It all depends on coming together and everyone buying into the system. And I think that they have, based on what I read in the training camp reports. It's night and day when it comes to this defense. I believe this defense, sky's the limit. You can be a top 10 defense. It's no doubt.
Phones, you want to take the floor?
Sure. I'm going to be a traditional Twitter Browns fan in this instance. I'm going to hype this team up so exponentially high that anything shy of immaculate is a disappointment for this team. Okay. Now no. And then after week 3, when we get badly beaten by one surprisingly young team, I'm going to cry up a storm about it. No. But in all seriousness, the pieces are there. The only thing that's going to stop this team really is themselves. I mean, let's be honest here. Everything is in place for success in this group. I think everybody is on the same exact page, which is important, obviously, in terms of anything of an organization, whether it is sports related or work related in a professional setting. It's not sports that aren't professional, but you guys know what I mean. Everybody is on the same page, reaching the same goal, and they're all playing their part. The only thing that can go wrong is the internal aspect of things. Myles Garrett getting into a car accident. What was it? All the drama from some of the defensive linemen last year getting arrested or staying in the spotlight. All of that stuff is not only going to happen. Okay, it's almost comical because it's the Browns. Like, you're going to see something bad happen to this team at some point, and it's not going to be injury related at all. It's going to be like, oh, someone gambled on football during the season. And you're just like, what are you doing? Like, that's the only thing stopping this team is themselves entirely. That's my thoughts. I think this defensive unit is going to be great. I think Jim Schwartz not only has the history here, but all over the NFL, he's clearly recognized and widely regarded as a great defensive coordinator. So we'll see.
I agree with both takes. Not trying to take away from you, Curtis. You're phenomenal. The thing I like about Jim Schwartz, though, is that he brings a good locker room presence, and then he brings that, like, I'm going to be the center, I'm going to be the coach, I'm going to be the voice. But, like Phone said, you never know. You really never know with the Browns. Like, what was it, week 1 with that Myles Garrett accident? And maybe not. I don't even remember that far back. But it was something just like, oh, great, our best player is potentially incapacitated.
He was going 89 miles, or it was like 90, 89, somewhere in there, in like a 45, and just flipped his car.
It was a Porsche, by the way. Really nice car.
I know.
That's a big man for a small ass car. I'm not gonna lie.
I like to think of it like you ever see when Shaq does those Buick commercials? There is no way his fat ass is in those damn things. I don't know how the hell like I've met Myles Garrett multiple times. Okay. That is not a frame that fits into, that portion of, a car.
No.
If I may add, I like to think of myself not as a fan, but as a more of a reoccurring ancillary character that reappears in this series. Like I like to think of myself as not the guy that knows anything about football, not in the slightest bit. I couldn't tell you anything about the schematics of how a football playbook is drawn up, but you know what? I'm here for the jokes. Okay.
Gotta have the comedic relief.
Exactly.
You're the sitcom character that shows up with like the big like round of applause and it's like, thank you.
Yeah, I like to be. He
is the Kimmy Gibbler of this show.
That's exactly what I think. I'm the Kimmy Gibbler of this show. Let's go.
Wow.
Oh God, Kimmy Gibbler? What is that from? What show is that from?
Full House.
Oh God, yes. You know who else I am? I'm Stacy Dilson from Zoe 101. Cotton Schwab. If you've never seen that show, oh my God, it's such a good show, bro. We had the best generation of TV shows. God. But yeah, I'm just the Stacy Dilson of or not Stacy. I'm the Kimmy Gibbler of this.
I love
when
that.
I really want to be the John Stamos, but that's just not happening.
Jumping off of the defense, because obviously we know it's just going to be better next year. Joe Barry being gone, making some massive additions in the offseason, it's going to be better no matter what. It would take a drastic catastrophe, which knock on wood, hope it doesn't happen, for this defense to not be better next year. But where the Browns...
Did you say Joe Barry? Isn't it the offensive coordinator for the Packers?
They hate him. They should. They hate him.
Yeah,
they hate him.
I know. I hate it.
Oh my God, what's the Browns defensive coordinator's name?
Joe Woods.
Joe Woods.
You combined Andrew Barry and Joe Woods and got Joe Barry.
Listen, there are so many names I've had to remember for this fucking series. Sometimes they get mixed up. Okay, last episode I was talking to a couple of Chargers fans, and I was talking about their defensive line being beat up. And because Khalil Mack has been hurt every year of his career since he left the Raiders, I just lumped Khalil Mack in with Joey Bosa, and they had to remind me that Khalil Mack, for the first time in like 5 years, played every single game last year. It happens. I get mixed up sometimes.
I'm sorry. Who are you talking to again?
Chargers fans.
Those don't exist. Next question.
He was talking to the 2 Chargers fans.
I actually found one. The other guy isn't a Chargers fan. He just isn't he's a football fan, not a team fan. He's one of those.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh,
that doesn't count. That doesn't count at all.
That doesn't. You know what he is? He's the guy that wears, when a player leaves, he wears that player's jersey, like the old jersey, because he doesn't want to get the new one, like a newer one.
We were talking about the Chargers.
All like Baker jerseys, Phones.
Baker's fair. I feel like a Baker jersey in Cleveland is okay.
No.
What's wrong with Baker?
No, it's not.
Baker is terrible. No.
I know he's lovable.
Listen. If it was a Bernie Kosar jersey, a Vinny Testaverde jersey, a Joe Thomas jersey,
how old do you think I am?
A Dwayne Bowe jersey,
you weren't there for Derek Anderson. You weren't there for those days.
If you didn't see me at my Deshaun Kaiser, you cannot have me at my Deshaun Watson. Okay,
those Kevin Hogan days,
those Cody Kessler days.
Listen, I feel your pain, man.
Makes you want to kick a fat kid at church camp.
It does. Having a bad kid or having a bad quarterback, it really does.
You know how I think we talked about this last year, but you know how big I was on Brady Quinn. Like,
yeah,
you know how big
you are the one Brady Quinn fan.
Yeah,
you are his strongest soldier.
Who do you think had more support when they were coming out of of school? Was it Brady Quinn or Tim Tebow? I just
Oh.
remember the hype of both of those just being astronomical.
That's a really tough question. That's a good
Yeah,
question.
I want to say
Tough
Tebow
question.
because he was a little bit closer to social media. Like Facebook was at least a
Yeah.
thing then.
You want to talk about a social? People throw out the term social media quarterback. That's a social media quarterback right there, Tim Tebow.
Oh yeah.
Love the guy. Great guy.
He's too pretty to get hit.
Fantastic human.
He's too pretty to get hit.
Yeah.
I remember when Colt McCoy was doing those Dodge Ram commercials too. That's how old I am. He stopped making money at the NFL. He started making money during Dodge Ram commercials.
Well, he's still making money in the NFL. He's on the Cardinals right now?
Yeah, he's about to start for the Cardinals.
Yeah. What a world we live in. This is wonderful. But anyways,
I hate it here.
Yeah. But talking about the Browns' run game, because in my opinion, this is the most exciting thing about this football team. And I know that sounds taboo in the year 2023, calling a run game exciting, but I don't care. I'm a nerd. I like a well-blocked run scheme. The only thing that this team does not have that keeps me from calling this like my favorite run game in football is a fullback. That's the only thing holding them back. But they come close. You know, I love what Kevin Stefanski brings to the table. His run scheme is so complex and diverse, and there's so many moving parts, and he manages to do that without getting into this newfangled zone rushing scheme that everybody wants to use, where you have your lineman, you know, kind of blocking I dropped something. You have your lineman blocking a zone rather than doing the whole head up thing, because that's what he does. It's a man blocking scheme, head up blocking, and just to look at like the percentages of types of runs the Browns ran last year. I'm a mess right now. I apologize. They were 32nd in inside zone. They were 11th in outside zone. So they did have a little bit of that zone in there, but not nearly as much as other teams. They were second in pin and pull, 9th in counter, 3rd in power. And these guys, like I said, they're just always moving. They're always pulling somebody. It's just a nightmare scenario for a defense because every type of run you have to fit differently and you have to defend differently. And when Stefanski's throwing all these different concepts at you, you never know what's coming next, so you can't anticipate it. And that's why the Browns' run game is so good. That and the fact that they have Nick Chubb, who, in my opinion, is the best running back in football right now. So I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that as Browns fans. If I don't know. I don't know how to ask it. Just if you want to throw anything out there.
We're going to be so angry about the whole run the ball situation because that's what everyone talked about last year, like running the ball more and doing this and that. It was just a very, very tiring subject. You can't run the ball every 30 times. That's how your running back gets worn down. It's just, I love a run game, an efficient one, but 30 to 35 carries for your running back, yeah, you're just asking for them to have a short career. Like, that's all I got to say about it.
I can't disagree with that.
That's all I got to add. James, you can take it from here. All I'm going to say is Nick Chubb is the best running back in the NFL.
I love Nick Chubb. You're not going to get me wrong on that one. I love him. I think there's more of a focus on them straight up using running backs like old school running backs and removing out of the pass game. I was a big fan, like pre-draft process. I love Jerome Ford, and I'm so glad we didn't sign another running back to stick behind him. I think he is phenomenal. I think he was underappreciated going in. Dude was a running back at Alabama, ended up going to Cincinnati. He kind of gives me like Nick Chubb, like diet Nick Chubb. I love Jerome Ford. I love everything about him. I think he's going to be such a good like secondary tool for us.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I like Jerome Ford a lot too. Maybe not as much as you, but I do think he's a great compliment to Nick Chubb. And I think despite what a lot of people may think with Kareem Hunt leaving, I think Jerome Ford, given how good this offensive line is and how well schemed this running game is, I don't think you're going to see as much of a drop off as a lot of people might expect just based off the name value, right? Mm-hmm. And also, I got to give a shout out to Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller, because if they aren't there, this run game doesn't work. They are the true keys to making this all work, because with all these moving parts, you got to have guards that are good at pulling, can get out in space, can light somebody up. And that's exactly what they bring to the table.
David, if I may add something, have you ever seen Wyatt Teller in college? Like any photos of him?
Not.
Why don't you take a look at what Wyatt Teller looked like at Virginia Tech for a second? Because I just want to see your initial reaction. That he had a pretty significant look to him that I don't think I don't think you'd ever expect.
You talking about the long hair?
Yeah,
I love it.
I know. He kind of
That's a guard.
That's a guard right there.
That is a man's guard right there. I love it.
That's a man's man.
Cool, but like, who is this? Whose man is this?
I saw that too. Hey,
Damn.
listen, that's before he hit puberty. Okay, he had to hit that football puberty.
Apparently.
That's what whole milk and 40 eggs does to you every day.
Exactly. That's the difference between a guard and a guard. You know, that's a man's man right there, like James said. But
like there are 32 centers in the NFL, but have you ever seen Jason Kelsey with a mullet? That's a guard.
Exactly. But jumping over to the passing game, not as much to talk about here. We already talked about it being pretty disappointing, but just throwing out some of the numbers here. They were 21st in play action, which is a little bit odd considering how great their run game is. Usually you'd want to, be able to use that to build into the passing game and whatnot. They were 31st in average time to throw, meaning they had the second most time to throw in the league with 3 seconds. No surprise there with how good that offensive line is. 7th in air yard percentage with 57%. They just weren't that great after the catch. 8th in average depth of target. Like I said, they really had to get the ball down the field and rely on those chunk plays to make anything work in the passing game. So because of that, they made some moves at receiver. And if I'm not mistaken, at one point this offseason, they had over 20 receivers rostered. They might still, I don't know. I haven't necessarily kept up with how much movement there's been in training camp. So my next question for you guys is just, what do you expect to come out of this receiver room? And are there any names that are maybe down the depth chart that you expect to make the roster that might surprise people?
Dalen Baldwin. I've been hearing a lot of good positive things about Dalen Baldwin. He's that one guy on the roster that could potentially, he could be on the practice squad, but he could be on the roster and contribute in some ways, maybe special teams, maybe get some offensive looks. I know he's probably going to play tomorrow in the preseason game. That's going to happen. But Dalen Baldwin, that's my guy to look for. Also, Cedric Tillman, of course. I think he's going to get some opportunities. But Dalen Baldwin, look out for him.
Solid.
I gotta say, another guy I was big on, Jalen Darden coming over. I love
Damn it!
him.
God damn you!
North
Damn
Texas.
it! You have the one guy I wanted to talk about. All right.
I love Cedric Tillman too, but Anyway, Jalen Darden. I think same thing. I think he's more of a special teams guy, but we needed special teams. We needed returners. Our returning was terrible last year. There's a lot of BS that went around that. Shout out Demetri Felton, but. I think he ends up finding a role. I think that we just need that depth as much as possible. Anyway, Phones, who are you going to say?
Yeah, I think David Bell could be pretty special, honestly. I think he's a very underrated player. I think in this passing offense, I don't think a lot of people are high on him because, one, at Purdue, while he was the number one option, that offense really wasn't, I guess, effective. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it really wasn't going anywhere outside of him. So, it's, you're the prettiest looking shit in the room. I mean, okay, yeah, everyone's going to probably want you, but at that point, there's really nothing else you can really ask for. I think he could really develop into something solid. I think Amari Cooper could really mentor him and he could continue to move up the depth chart. Do I think he's going to be a number one, two borderline one? No, but this room is casually filled with, I'd arguably say a one with a pretty hard argument for everybody fighting for that number 2 spot, even with Donovan Peoples-Jones still on this team.
Yeah, I really like David Bell. I was big on him coming out. It was pretty disappointing to see him not do much last year. But upon going back and kind of looking at where the passing offense was and all the different things going on, it makes sense. I'm expecting the Browns to throw the ball a little bit more because, as Curtis mentioned, if you rely too heavily on the run game and Nick Chubb, eventually he's going to get hurt We're starting to see a lot of that with these running backs. And Nick Chubb, considering you've already paid him and how big of a part of your offense he is, I can't imagine you want to run him into the ground. So if the passing game gets going, I do expect David Bell to be a solid 4, solid 5, maybe, depending on what happens with Donovan Peoples-Jones and Elijah Moore, who I almost forgot you guys traded for, and also Cedric Tillman. Like, it's an interesting room. And it'll be definitely be interesting to see what ends up happening, because there are names in this room, guys, you didn't mention, Marquise Goodwin, Jakeem Grant, Anthony Schwartz, like notable names that the average NFL fan would recognize. And while they're not great, they can definitely contribute. So it's going to be interesting when the Browns have to cut a couple of these guys to see what's going to happen with them, because they'll get picked up pretty quickly to at least be depth.
I love Bones.
I have a
I
question.
think we're going the same path.
I was just going to say that here's the problem is that what we're running into, and this is one of my final points before I have to depart here. This is an every year thing. You have names: Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Baker Mayfield, Kareem Hunt, David Njoku, John Johnson, Troy Hill, who else? Oh, how can I forget my favorite player ever, Jadeveon Clowney? You have the names here. You have that name recognition already built into this team. It is the production that needs to follow at this time. That is what I think, really, since Baker has been drafted, what we have lacked is having that core group of guys that not only have that name recognition, but the production to follow it as suit. Now, this is a completely new culture. This is a completely new, room in terms of an offense, in terms of a defense, and really the organization outside of Stefanski and Andrew Berry and the ownership are completely flipped on its head. So it's interesting to see, but I'm glad, David, you mentioned that, because it's all these names with none of the results to follow it. Okay. You can give me all these guys. Give me these guys all the time. But at the end of the day, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Travis Kelce and Stephon Diggs are getting further into the season than we are, year in and year out. So,
yeah, for sure. I agree 100%. And it's definitely something that's going to be worth noting this year is who's going to be the guy to step up, right? Who's going to be the guy to step up and produce and really big for the Browns. And obviously you're hoping it's the quarterback. Might be, might not be. That's yet to be determined. Respectfully, I'm kind of hoping it's not him. I'm hoping it's more, someone like Amari Cooper or David Njoku, the defense, whoever, literally anyone else, right? It'll definitely be interesting to monitor for sure. And that's a fantastic point that I didn't even think to bring up. So props to you for that, because that is 100% on the nose with the Browns.
Thank you. I want to thank my ass. I pulled it right out of it.
Well, I mean, it's true. Like I said, it's absolutely true.
David, before we segue into anything else, I do have to depart.
Mm-hmm.
I am running on a bit of a tight schedule at the moment, but thank you for letting me on. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to plug your Twitter or anything, by all means, you can go
Please
ahead.
don't follow me. I am a god-awful follow. I couldn't be more wrong about my takes in sports and probably in life. But if you, for some reason, you want to read the most wrong human on Twitter, it is at Jamie Renner 17. I take baseball way too serious, and I take so much pride in dogging the Browns franchise and the fan base that follows suit. So please don't ever follow me. I don't ever want the recognition.
Well, I'll make sure to put a link in the description so they know exactly which account to not follow.
Exactly. I want you to make it. You know what? Don't even add the URL. Make it, but you make it so you have to have them highlight it and open a new tab to open it, and then have it. You ever guys ever seen the meme? I was gonna say link it to the Twitter meme of just that gigantic black dude sitting on the end of the bed. Has anyone ever seen that meme?
I know
just
exactly
make it like
what
that.
you're talking about.
Them. But thank you. I
know
appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, for sure, man. I appreciate you coming on. But jumping over to free agency, the first question I have for you guys is which one of these free agent losses hurts the most? Whether it's, somebody you think is going to impact the team not being there anymore, or if it's just a player you really liked and you're sad to see go.
To be blunt, I can't think of one off the top of my head. I mean, John Johnson left. I was, looking at the film and how he looked. It looked like he didn't fit with what the Browns wanted him. He's like a strong safety playing free safety. So that move just didn't work. Kareem Hunt, I kind of knew he was cooked when He was playing the last couple of games. Like, no, well, like if he goes, I'm fine with Jerome Ford. I ride with Jerome Ford. Jadeveon Clowney, kind of, a mercenary in his own right, and kind of threw Myles Garrett under the bus. I'm like, all right, he's not coming back anytime soon. But the free agency losses, they're not really major. They're kind of minor. Greedy Williams, I didn't even know he left until someone mentioned it. He went to the Eagles on a 1-year deal, but that was surprising. But the Perion Winfrey draft pick from last season, that was kind of a disappointing thing. But I'm in a chat with a group of people who are closely connected to the Browns, and one of the editors told me, I was at work at the time, I got a text message. Well, Perion Winfrey got in trouble again. I'm like, I just made an article about Perion Winfrey, and he just got in trouble. He's just letting me down. So, I think when it comes to this regime, they're probably trying to have a no tolerance when it comes to things like that. They could have let Perion Winfrey go after the first offense that he had, but the multiple instances in which he was coming late to practice, he was essentially not acting like a pro. So, Cleveland decided to let him go. I mean, that was his final strike. They let him go after that whole incident. And, people will criticize Andrew Berry when it comes to specific free agency moves that he has made. But when it comes to draft picks, they're a little bit more critical. But in terms of free agency losses, they didn't lose anybody major. Kareem Hunt was going to go eventually. You're not going to pay him that much money when it comes to his running back market now. John Johnson wasn't a fit for what Jim Schwartz wanted. Jadeveon Clowney was kind of a mercenary in his own right. In terms of the guys that they lost, they're minor. So, they weren't major. You re-signed the guys you had to get back. But in terms of their losses, they're minor. I won't be missing those guys tremendously. But, not many major guys have left, in my honest opinion.
Fair.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because like there are connections I have to some of these players, like within the colleges they went to. Like I'm a South Carolina fan. Like, I love Jadeveon Clowney for that. Forever gonna love him for that, and it's a curse. And like John Johnson, like Boston College was like right down the road, like what I was watching. Greedy Williams, thank God he's gone. I'm gonna be honest. I'm so glad he's gone. Eagles, take him. Deal with it.
I mean,
Yeah,
I didn't hate him. I didn't hate John Johnson. I thought he was a good, solid player, but people on Twitter made it seem like he was one of the worst players ever. Like, well, of course, Twitter, how people on Twitter are, but it didn't fit. Sometimes you got to admit when you messed up. That he messed up.
Sure.
They messed up on that signing. I thought he was going to come in and be that solid free safety for Cleveland. Complete opposite of that. You can blame that on Joe Woods. You can blame that on JJ3, but it happens. You miss more than you hit. So, can't be mad at that.
For sure.
I can't be.
No, you're right, and I don't think there's a single Browns fan who, like, before he played any games before he stepped onto First Energy, like, didn't think he was going to be like this amazing person. Like, I thought he was going to be great. I thought he was like, we needed a safety, he filled it, and I was like, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like you said, Twitter's very reactive, and Browns Twitter would tear him apart. NFL Twitter really tore him apart, if we're going to be honest. I liked him. I still have a soft spot for John Johnson. But I think, like, the one, like you said, the one that hurts the most is probably Perion Winfrey. Perion Winfrey, before last season even started, was talking about how he was hyped up to be a Brown and, like, all this, like, very, like, lifeblood type stuff. And then to see all that happen, it's disappointing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the big thing is, and Curtis nailed it, there wasn't a player that left that wasn't replaced or isn't at least replaceable. Like, I have some of the names written down here that you guys lost. Jadeveon Clowney, replaced him with za'darius Smith. Kareem Hunt, you have Jerome Ford. All three of us like him. We think he can fill that role at least. Hjalte Froholt, he's just a backup. Not a huge deal there. I think he was solid depth, but he got paid starter money in Arizona, so it's going to be hard to keep him around. Taven Bryan, fine. Defensive line was bad. Why keep any of them? Jacoby Brissett, he got a chance to go compete for a starting job in Washington. I don't think he's going to win it, but he has the chance there. Dearness Johnson, kind of the same thing as Kareem Hunt, although I do like him a good bit. Obviously, he's a little bit of a, one of those underdogs, right? Played really good as an RB3, got a few chances, played really well. And then some of the other names here, like Deion Jones, Jermaine Carter, Ronnie Harrison, Greedy Williams, Chase Vinovich, Jesse James, who I'm only bringing up because he played for the Bears. Like, there really wasn't anything massive to talk about with the Browns free agent losses. I agree completely. It wasn't anything crazy. The only name I was worried about you guys losing, you bastards ended up bringing back and stealing from the Bears, and that's Ethan Pocic, who is one of the more underrated centers in the league. Was really surprised he went back to Cleveland. And then there's another name that got brought back that I know James is a pretty big fan of. But do you not know who I'm referring to?
I can't off the top of my head.
AJ Green.
Oh, better AJ Green. Yeah, good call.
Yeah, our boy.
Ethan Pocic was a surprise too. Like I didn't think he was supposed to be anything. Like he was supposed to be a fill-in like depth center, and then that was a great surprise.
AJ Green.
Yeah, AJ Green's good. That's my point. But like we were hyping him up last summer when we did this series. We're big fans of AJ Green.
Yeah, you were talking about Ethan Pocic for like 1 second. I remember Ethan Pocic because, I watched Seattle football, Seahawks football. When he was a center with us, he was not great. He wasn't. He was usually getting bullied in the running game. Passing game was okay. He comes to Cleveland, and he's much better than I expected. The Bill Callahan effect. But, I'm glad that they brought him back because when he was in Seattle, they were moving him around a lot. One time he was out tackle. They moved him to guard, and they moved him to center. He comes to Cleveland with Bill Callahan, looks a lot better than what he has. So, that was a very good signing. Even though Nick Harris was supposed to be the starter, then he got hurt in the preseason. So he came in, stepped in, looked well. Ethan Pocic went down. The entire offensive line kind of deteriorated a little bit. You had Froholt at center, and that was – we're not going to talk about that, but, it was just a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. Other names that you guys brought back, Sion Takitaki, one of the coolest names in football. Thomas Graham Jr., another former Bear. Jakeem Grant, Anthony Walker Jr., Michael Dunn, and Jordan, last name I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce because I always butcher it because I'm really bad at names. Linebacker, how do you say his name? What do y'all got to know? Kuznak, maybe? Kunasik? Okay.
Yeah, that's how it was.
Okay, there you go. He also got brought back. Like I said, I have to say this every episode. I am terrible at pronouncing names. I called Chris Olave Chris Olav for like 4 months leading into the draft, and it took my TikTok comments screaming at me to get me to fix it. So I'm awful. I'm a terrible person. I suck at names. But jumping into the free agents you guys added, which I feel like is a lot more exciting to talk about. Who was your favorite free agent addition for the Browns this year?
It's got to be Okoronkwo for me. Yeah, I was going to go ahead. It's got to be Okoronkwo for me because the Browns' pass rush was kind of, it was Myles Garrett and a bunch of other guys, but Okoronkwo comes over from Houston. I watched this film. Good burst off the edge, able to get to the quarterback quickly. I think he ranked, top 5 when it comes to pass rush win rate. He's a pretty solid addition. That was probably my underrated pickup for Cleveland, Okoronkwo. Even though his name is difficult to pronounce for some people.
Do re-signings count? Can I put that one on there? Not AJ Green, but
sure, you can.
Okay, man, whoa, what happened to my camera there? Anyway, we'll figure that out in a sec. I love Anthony Walker. I think he's a phenomenally underrated player. I think last year wasn't his best showing, but 2 years ago I fell in love with who he was as a player because I got to actually watch him. Anthony Walker Jr., I think, is phenomenal. So I was really happy we brought him back somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. Anthony Walker, I do agree, is pretty underrated linebacker. And then Okoronkwo, again, really mad that you guys stole him from Chicago. I wanted him to be a Bear so fucking bad because I agree with Curtis. He's one of the most underrated edges in football. He's phenomenal. I'm really surprised the Texans didn't try harder to keep him around. Granted, they ended up drafting Will Anderson, so it's okay, but he's awesome. And the fact that he's not even technically a starter for you guys after trading for Za'Darius Smith is insane. I know Curtis brought up the NASCAR packages that the Browns have been working. That's going to go hard. That's going to go incredibly hard. Put him, Za'Darius Smith, and Myles Garrett all on the field at the same time. It's going to be fantastic. The name I'm most excited about for Cleveland is Dalvin Tomlinson because, as we mentioned, the defensive line sucked. And Dalvin Tomlinson, again, somebody that has been really good for a decent while now. He just doesn't get brought up a lot. One of the more underrated defensive tackles in football. It also makes me really happy to know that he's not in Minnesota anymore, so I don't have to worry about him when the Bears play the Vikings, but now he's going to be in Cleveland, going to be playing alongside Myles Garrett and everyone else I just named. Defensive line scary now. It went from a super squishy interior to a very, 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 very respectable group. Dalvin and Tomlinson leading the way, and then we'll talk about the other big run-stuffing defensive tackle they added when we get to the draft. Some of the other names trading for Elijah Moore, who's somebody that I've always really liked. Again, another guy I kind of thought the Bears might have wanted to trade for, but we traded for DJ Moore, so who cares? Elijah Moore is great, though. He's going to be a great 2 or 3, whatever he ends up being for Cleveland. Za'Darius Smith, again, just a tremendous run-stopping edge rusher, is going to be great opposite Myles Garrett. A couple other names here. Another former Bear. I promise I'm not going out of my way to bring up the Bears. It's just relevant. Matt Adams got brought in. Just a very good, rotational linebacker, get shit done type of guy. Not flashy, not exciting, but he will do what you need him to do, and that's all Cleveland needs of him. Josh Dobbs got brought in, former Pittsburgh Steeler. Let's see here. Mike Ford, Marquise Goodwin, Jordan Akins, Maurice Hurst, Tristan Hill, a lot of names on the defensive line there. And then Wes Martin and Colby Goddard. They're in a position to win now. That's what this team is. They spend a lot of money in free agency this year, the way all their contracts are set up. This is a team that wants to win now because after, I think either this year or next year, I can't remember exactly when, their cap room gets fucked bad. They have invested a lot of money into older players, which is fine. That's how you win. But they have really given themselves a short timetable, especially considering all the money they gave to Watson. So just from a fan perspective, what are your thoughts on that? Are you happy that's the direction they're going, or, how do you feel about it?
Once they traded for Watson, at first I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought, you say, all right, we got Baker for another year. You might as well just run with him and see what happens. But clearly the Browns wanted to move on because I'm pretty sure if Baker stayed for another year, that whole coaching staff in the front office is getting fired. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. You can't do that, especially in an AFC that got loaded with quarterbacks. Even though Russell Wilson looks a little bit cooked at the time, you had to upgrade at the quarterback position. Regardless of what Deshaun Watson did off the field, you have to go after him and you had to do what you had to do to get him. Because to be fair, there were other teams interested in Deshaun Watson. 3 NFC South teams, the Panthers, the Saints, the Falcons, who were desperately trying to get after Watson. And I believe that team would have matched what Cleveland did if Watson gave them the opportunity to match. He chose Cleveland. So what Cleveland decided to do is okay, we got the star quarterback. Now we have to figure everything else out and just hope that it works because you have a talented roster. I think this is a top 15, top 10 roster in this league. You can make the playoffs in the AFC. I believe that this team is a dark horse in the AFC North to actually win the division. I don't think they're going to win the division, but they can cause problems for Cincinnati and Baltimore. I think they can give problems to Kansas City. I think they can give problems to Buffalo, Miami, maybe potentially. But this team, they're talented. The talent is there. Everything needs to come together or else things are going to happen. People are going to lose their jobs. I feel that Andrew Berry decided, you know what? I'm not losing my job because a quarterback can't hit a simple slant route and make my star wide receiver and Odell Beckham request, I'm out of here. So he decided to go after Deshaun Watson, regardless of the off the field issues, because what other choice did you have? What other choice did you have? You had to upgrade the quarterback position and get the necessary pieces to succeed in this league. Because if you don't have the quarterback, you're not going anywhere. And if you don't have the quarterback, you're probably going to get fired. Andrew Berry probably didn't want to get fired. He went after Watson. I can't be mad at him for that. I can't be. But you have the team to compete in the AFC. You have the team to potentially win the division. And if you get Deshaun Watson, 2019 Deshaun Watson, that is fine by me. If you get 2020 Deshaun Watson, you're cooking with something. I just think that this team is talented enough to match up with the top dogs in the AFC. I will find that out week 1 when they go against the Bengals. If you can beat the Bengals at home and it's convincing, you're going somewhere. But those 3 games that you got against the Bengals, the Steelers, I believe you played Baltimore. If you can go 2-1 or 3-0, sky's the limit. Sky's the limit for this team. I'm not saying they're a Super Bowl contender, but this team is talented. I see the vision. A lot of people are selling low on this team. I'm not. I view this team in a high regard. Do I think they're going to be in the Super Bowl this year, as I repeated? No, I don't. But this is a talented group with a talented team. I just have high hopes for this team. Anything less of a playoff appearance, disappointment. If they can get to the playoffs and win one game, you can go from there.
I'll piggyback off of that. Like looking at, I'm also not going to book them for Super Bowl. Let's not be wild. I do think we're in the best position we have ever been. And I think looking at this team, looking at our schedule, I don't think there's a team in the NFL that we can't at least go toe-to-toe with. Like, there's not a game on there. There are toss-up games, but it's not like a 40-60 toss. I think the toss-up games are pure 50-50 for me. I think going down that roster, we are a competitive team. We are potentially better than most of the teams that we are playing this year. And I think we are a playoff team. We should be in the AFC Championship. I'm just going to leave it there. I don't see any reason with everything we've done that we should not be in the AFC Championship.
Yeah.
It's not like, you can go ahead, David. You can go ahead and give your opinion real quick.
Well, I was just going to say I agree 100%. Like, as much as I hate to say it, because I am very, very vocally, like, not wanting Watson to succeed, I don't disagree by any means. This Browns team very quietly had one of the better off seasons. You have a quarterback that has shown he can be incredibly talented. You have a good run game. You have the pieces on defense. You have good pass catchers. You have a good head coach. This team has everything. And, you know, it's definitely getting lost in the sea that is the AFC. Like, I saw somebody today, I want to say it was Nico, Elite Takes, that was talking about his record predictions for the AFC. And he was like, the 12th team in the AFC has 9 wins for me. And that's not unreasonable to say. Like, this conference is stacked. Because of how stacked it is, the Browns are getting lost in that. However, it's not crazy to say that this team could win their division, go on a deep playoff run. And I don't even think it's crazy to say that they can make it to the Super Bowl. I know you guys are being a little bit more conservative than that. And, you know, maybe I'm pushing it a little too far if even I'm exceeding the expectations of Browns fans, but it's possible. There is absolutely a world where we see Cleveland fighting for a Super Bowl this year, and I wouldn't be that surprised by it.
Like, people don't want to admit that they've closed the gap in the AFC between the Bengals and Baltimore, because I watched those games like more than once, all 22. I'm not going to get into an NFL Plus product because, you know, like, leave it at that. But I've watched those games. Cleveland can hang with Cincinnati. They can hang with Baltimore. The only issue that I have is that somehow, some way, they find a way to screw it up, whether it's internally or things just fall apart. It's not like this team can't hang with Cincinnati. You've beaten this team probably more than you have been before. Baltimore, it's been more of a toss-up. But now you have a quarterback in Watson who has shown ability to go against the Mahomes, the Allens, the Lamar Jacksons. You have that now. And you have that in the division when you have two guys who are franchise-level guys, in Joe Burrow with the Bengals and Lamar Jackson with the Ravens. Because before, when you had Baker Mayfield on your team and you had him going against Lamar Jackson, I'm pretty confident saying, well, we're not winning this game. I can't trust Baker to make a wise decision. And if we go against Burrow, I'm like, maybe I can trust Baker to maybe play decent or competent. But with Watson, who I think can play at a top 10 level, a lot of people want to write him off because of that 6-game sample size. I'm not doing that. The 6 games that he played in, I thought he made progress from the first game. The first game, he was terrible. I will openly admit he was bad. The second game, I saw a little bit of progress. I saw him go through his reads a little bit more. I saw him not force balls down the field. I saw him make good throws, key throws. He made progress as the games went on. It might not look like it on the stat sheet, which people want to bring up, but the progress is there. It's better that he got those 6 games out of the way now instead of waiting until this year to get those games out of the way. Because if he missed the entire season, you're already screwed, because let's be fair, he's going to be out of football for at least 2 years. Those 6 games were his preseason games. he looked rusty. That's going to happen when you're out for about a year or so. So overall, I don't have this lack of faith in Watson. I've seen him do it in Houston with a bottom tier cast and Bill O'Brien as his head coach. Even though he was a terrible GM, he was a decent head coach. I saw him do that with terrible wide receivers when D-Hop was gone. It's not a question of if he can do it, it's when. I believe he can get back to that level. The question is when. I don't think it's going to be like right away. It might take a little bit. It might start a little bit slow, then it builds up. I don't expect to go up right away. Maybe it could, but if it goes gradually up and it continues to skyrocket like that, they can go anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, for the sake of full transparency, I absolutely agree with what you had to say about Watson. Like, it's tough to evaluate a quarterback who has been away from the sport for a year and a half, right? Like, that's the same reason why a lot of people, including myself, don't think Colin Kaepernick has much of a chance in the league at this point. Like, major props to him for putting his career aside for something bigger and something more important. But at the end of the day, he hasn't played football in 5 years now? We saw what an elite quarterback, or what happens to an elite quarterback for after a year and a half away from the game. Taking a very good quarterback away for 5 years, I mean, come on, it's going to be even worse. So, like, with Watson, I do think we're going to see a better version of him this year, especially given all of the upgrades at wide receiver he's gotten, and the offensive line's going to be healthy and things like that. So I would be, how do I want to put this? I would be very dishonest if I said I don't think Watson can turn it around. Again, even if I'm rooting against it, I do think it's very possible, and honestly, probably likely, because Cleveland has a great coaching staff. They're going to get his head in the right place. And, he's going to be able to go back out and, like you said, at the very least, probably hit that 2019 Deshaun Watson. If he comes out and throws 5,000 yards, I'd be a little surprised. This year, at least. Next year, if he looks good this year, different thing, things like that. But yeah, Cleveland has a really good roster around Watson. And if they can get everything to click, they can get all their moving pieces in order, get all their ducks in a row, this team could be really scary. And I feel like a lot more people need to be talking about that. But jumping off of that and going into the NFL draft, kind of the same way we were talking about free agency, what was your favorite draft pick the Browns made?
Where to start? There's so many, even with limited draft capital.
Yeah, I think the Browns did quietly really good with their draft. Like, they didn't get any crazy big names, but they did a pretty good job of filling out the roster and getting guys that they needed at specific positions.
Honestly, one of the value picks. I don't understand how he was available in the third round, but Ika, whatever. Like, him being available in the third round was absurd to me. I thought he was a fringe first round pick.
Really?
I thought he was up there. Yeah, I had super high grades on him.
Really? See, I had him graded in the third round.
Really? I had him second because of his combine kind of brought it down a little bit.
Yeah, his combine, I'm not a big fan of how he holds up against double teams. And, like, he puts his head down a lot for a nose tackle. Like, a lot. And that's really concerning for me. Fringe second round for a nose, or fringe first round, for a nose tackle to begin with is interesting.
Absurd.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not trying to sound disrespectful. I'm just saying that's a bold take. I respect the boldness, if anything.
Look, my first mock draft. Go ahead, James.
No, you're right. Go ahead, go.
Oh yeah, like in the first mock draft I did, I had Ika going like late to the Kansas City Chiefs. Then I started doing more. I'm like, well, he's projected to go second or third. I'm like, it's not bad. I kind of watched over the tape and looked over his scouting report. There's a lot to like. I don't like how he, ducks his head under when he's a nose tackle, and that's kind of like a little bit concerning. But he can take up space. He's a guy with a high motor. I thought I was surprised. I was surprised when he was there. I thought Cleveland was going to go after Keanu Benton, but he was gone, unfortunately.
Benton was my guy, yeah.
I wanted Cleveland to get him so bad, but Ika's a solid guy. But that's not the draft pick like I'm in love with, though. I was going to pick a different one.
So I want to ask James real quick, how many DTs did you have ranked?
I'd have to actually look back and see what the actual rankings were.
Because I'm just curious how high you would have him.
I know for a fact I had him as a top 50 pick. I can say that, but it was definitely in like the 38 range almost. If I'm gonna like blindly say off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have my big board in front of me. I had Ika ranked as the 93rd prospect.
Woof. All right.
Yeah,
I'm really standing out against everybody here.
No, and that's okay. Listen, I love that. I love the boldness of it. Like I said, I don't mean any disrespect by disagreeing with you. I like having conflicting opinions because it's interesting to see what types of traits and whatnot that people value. Because like I said, Ika to me, I saw a lot of people, namely Brett Coleman, hyping him up to be like a Vita Vea clone or like a diet Vita Vea, and I didn't quite see that. Because to me, and I can comfortably say this because I'm also an individual of bigger stature, so I promise it's not coming from a place of hate. I feel like Ika, his final season, was playing with some unnecessary weight. Like he was holding weight that was kind of holding him back. And again, I'm not trying to tell the man how to live his life. He can do what he wants, right? By any means. If he wants to weigh whatever he weighs and hold that extra weight, go for it. It's his life. Again, I really want to hammer that home. I'm not questioning his life decisions or anything, but I feel like if you were to just slim down a little bit, a lot of my issues with him would be lesser because I feel like even for a nose, he was kind of slow. But him ducking his head and his weaknesses against double teams was really the big thing for me because when you're a nose, that's what you need. You need to be able to take on a double team. You need to be able to two gap, and you need to be able to watch the quarterback or the running back. And if you're not doing that, then it's going to hold you back a little bit. And also when he tackles, he like leaps at you. Like I've never seen a nose tackle jump to tackle people.
It's very weird.
And that's not good either because you want to set that hard base and wrap up and drop if you're a nose. You don't dive at guys if you don't have to. I still think he's going to be good though.
But I think a lot of what I was putting on that was like he is a huge human. He is 6'3",
for sure,
325. Like he's absurdly big. I think a lot of his like problems. I have less of an issue with players losing weight to get to being more dynamic than them like gaining weight to be better.
Well, that's fair too. I get that.
And I think the head down thing is a very like coachable thing. Even through, sure. I think he played 3 years at Baylor. Obviously, time will tell. I still think he's super talented. I think he was a steal in the 3rd round. I'm gonna die on that sword. I'm gonna die on that hill. Whatever thing you want me to die on, I'm gonna die on it for Siaka.
I wouldn't quite call it a steal, but I do think it was a good pick. Like I definitely see why Cleveland wanted him. And I think him having Tomlinson to learn from in Cleveland is going to do wonders for him. Like, because Tomlinson's what, 29, 30, somewhere in there.
I think a little later.
Yeah, and I think is he on a 1 or 2 year deal for Cleveland? I don't have that written down. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I want to say 2. I think I gave him an extra.
But either way, I think ideally what's going to happen for Cleveland is once Tomlinson's gone, Ika's going to be able to step up in that role. And like I said, I don't think he's going to be bad by any means. It's just he was a little more raw than I would have liked him to be, especially if we're talking about him as a borderline 1st round pick.
I misread that for a second. I thought we gave him a 4-year deal. I was really concerned there for a second. It was a 2-year deal.
I almost wouldn't have blamed you if you did, because Tomlinson's great. He's older, but with how bad your defensive line is, if he wants a 4-year deal, I'm giving him a 4-year fucking deal.
I don't blame you on that.
Longer than that.
But out of the other picks, is there anyone that stands out to the two of you? I know, Curtis, you said he wasn't your guy here.
It had to be Cedric Tillman for me. I mean, when it comes to like the slot receivers that Cleveland were looking at, it was like either Tyler Scott, Josh Downs, or Jalen Hyatt. And, once Jalen Hyatt was off the board, I'm like, okay, who are they going to draft now? And they said Cedric Tillman. I'm like, solid pickup. And I started watching his film a little bit more. I'm like, he was better than Jalen Hyatt this year.
Yes, he was.
Hurt because
damn straight.
Because everyone wants to hype up Jalen Hyatt. He's a talented player. Can't be met press coverage, but that's another different time for another story. But if Tillman didn't get hurt, he probably would have gone higher than what he expected. But when they picked him up, I figured maybe DPJ could be on the roster bubble, but I don't think that. But a solid big body guy, good catch radius guy, can basically get them 50-50 balls. He'll get some playing time this season, and it wouldn't be surprised me if he gets major playing time, like contributing in a huge way. That was I think my favorite pick, if I'd be completely honest.
Yeah, I like the Tillman pick a lot too. Another one that I wouldn't quite call a steal, but I think was a really good pickup. And I agree 100%. He was better than Jalen Hyatt. I don't care what anybody says. I get that Hyatt's a slot receiver, blah, 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 whatever. If you're getting manufactured touches as a wide receiver, which is what Jalen Hyatt was getting, I have my concerns, right? Now he's in New York. He's with Brian Dable, who can make bad wide receivers look really good. So I'm going to eat my words when he has like 800 yards this year or whatever. But I'm not a Hyatt guy. I'm much more of a Tillman guy for sure. Me personally, my favorite pick that you guys made, I gotta go with DeJuan Jones. You want to talk about a steal? That was a steal. DeJuan Jones to me was a first-round talent. If not, I think I actually had him as late first, early second. But either way, top 5 offensive tackle in the class. You get him in the 4th round. He gets to go work with Callahan, who was the best offensive line coach in football. Massive, super strong, great anchor, moves incredibly well for being as big as he is. He's a little bit of a leaner, but again, he's working with Callahan. He's somebody that I'm almost not at all worried about my issues with him now that he's in the NFL, because he's working with the perfect guy to fix all of that. And then you pair that with the fact that they got his teammate, Luke Weipler, who was also a steal. I had a 3rd round grade on him. I think I had him as the 3rd ranked center, if not 4th. And you get him in the 6th round because, what was it, an injury, I think, made him drop?
I have no idea why he fell so far. I mean, maybe I thought he could have stayed in school for like another year, but he chose to declare. And then I'm looking and seeing if he's available, and I'm like, oh, he's in the 6th round. I'm like, what happened? Like maybe he got some bad advice, but I was really, really, really surprised by that he fell so far in the 6th round, because at one point he was getting day 2 pick hype, and he went to the 6th. Like that was kind of a little bit shocking, a little bit surprising, but
sure. Yeah, he was a great value pick. I thought Isaiah McGuire was a pretty good pick. He was somebody that I was excited for, thinking about him as a rotational defensive end with Okoronkwo. And then you had za'darius Smith, and now it's like, well, fuck, where does he fit in? But they'll find a way to do it. He's really good. Got a lot of pop in his hands, good first step, really good run defender, high motor, strong, sets a good edge. He's somebody that, again, just like Ika learning from Tomlinson, I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to learn from za'darius Smith. Now, I hope to God, knock on wood, he doesn't teach him his workout regimen, or doesn't give him tips on how to stay healthy or anything like that. Maybe I shouldn't be making jokes about that. But every other aspect of za'darius Smith's game, he's a fantastic mentor for McGuire, and I'm excited to see what that's going to turn into. DTR, also a Brown now. A lot of people really liked him. I wasn't a DTR guy personally. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on him.
I mean, all I know is when I was in college and I got back from a late party that I'm not going to tell you what happened. Pac-12 after dark. Pac-12 after dark would be on, and I would be watching him for a little bit. I'm like, he's okay. He's a bit all over the place, but that's not a bad pickup. I think he'll fit in well. He'll get a good opportunity. That's all I have to say about that. Them Pac-12 after dark days they hit. They still do.
No, dude, 110%. Like I'm such a drunken, I'm watching these late Mountain West, whatever. A few years back, it's not happening as much now that I'm an old ass man. But a few years back, I became infatuated with Cole McDonald. And I was like, this kid could be electric. He's gonna be the best. He's out of Hawaii. He's got a great arm. He fucking throws a lot of interceptions, but who cares? Man, that didn't pan out at all. But DTR was in the same boat, because I watched him and I was like, oh my God, this guy's great. He runs so good. But sober brain, you watch him and you're like, he's a really good college quarterback. That's it.
Without trying to sound too rude to DTR, he is what NFL Twitter acts like Justin Fields is, specifically those who don't like Justin Fields, where, like Curtis said, he's kind of all over the place and he's a really good runner. It's just, he doesn't have a lot of that. The mental side of the game, he's really lacking. His mechanics are all over the place. He's fun. He's exciting. He's going to be somebody that's going to have a lot of cool preseason highlights. But if he has to come in for Watson, I think you're going to be a little worried. Like I said, I'm just not a big DTR guy.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. He's got the second half tomorrow.
I wasn't I wasn't high on him, but he was just like all over the place. Like I remember getting back late last night, and UCLA was playing. I'm like, oh, who's this guy playing quarterback? And they said, oh, that's Thompson-Robinson. I'm like, oh, let me see how he does. I'm like, he's all over the place. He was like, that's what you take away from this? I'm like, yeah, he's just all over the place. He'll
Yeah.
and I thought at one point he would be like, some late draft pick, like go undrafted, but Cleveland picked him up. I think he'll do well. He's supposed to get some playing time tomorrow. I'm interested to see that.
Yeah. And then the other draft pick, Cam Mitchell out of Northwestern. James, you're a college nerd. You got any thoughts on this guy?
I watched negative Northwestern games this year. I
Wow, you're
watched
no fun.
football to watch out because the first game I watched was Northwestern versus Nebraska and Ireland, which is like the most ass random team sent to Ireland. And I couldn't tell you a drop about Cam Mitchell. I'm going to be so honest.
Yeah, I mean, he was like one of the lone bright spots in their secondary. He's nothing special, but he's going to be a good depth, like developmental corner, in my opinion, at least. Curtis, I don't know if you have any thoughts on him, but
I
I think
mean,
he's fine.
I watched what, two Northwestern games. That was the Ireland game. I didn't really come away from anything other than both teams were pretty much bottom tier for the entire game. Then when they played
Mhm.
Ohio State in that, ridiculous weather game, he did stood out a couple times. He was one of the lone bright spots on that Northwestern team, which was abysmal from top to bottom. He'll probably fit in well. I think he'll be a solid rotational piece.
Yeah, for sure. But anyways, kind of shifting gears away from the draft and looking towards next season. The first question I have for you guys looking at next season is I know we've kind of touched on the AFC North and how good all the teams are already, but what team in the AFC North are you most threatened by? And you can't say none. You can't be the cool guy that's like, I fear nothing. You have to pick one because there's absolutely one you're going to be afraid of because it's a good fucking division.
For me, it's Baltimore. I do not fear Cincinnati. I don't care what anyone says.
Really?
Yes, it's bold
100%.
take. I'm
Hmm.
more afraid of Lamar Jackson and J.K. Dobbins than Joe Shiesty. I'm saying that right now because Lamar,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, because whenever Cleveland played against the Ravens, I would get this feeling of, this is going to be one of those Lamar Jackson going off games. In 2019, I got a glimpse of it at home when Cleveland was going against Baltimore, and it was the one pass he hit to Mark Andrews, and it was a wide open touchdown. I'm like, oh man, he's going to be in here for a long time, and it's not going to be fun. And when you add the fact that they have J.K. Dobbins, who, when healthy, I think is an underrated running back, the receiving
Absolutely.
core, their receiving core is going to be a lot better. They have
Hmm.
Odell now, which Browns fans hate. I do not hate Odell in any way, shape, or form. I appreciate his time here. But, Rashad Bateman, who I liked when he was coming out of college, a
Hmm.
wide receiver one type. I wish Green Bay got him, but they didn't.
I'm
But
so glad they didn't.
but he's in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. Their offense is going to be a lot more creative with Todd Monken than it was with Greg Roman because Greg Roman, as great as the game coordinator he was, the passing game was not his thing. It literally was a basic pass to the tight end, these short, underneath, simple concepts that will get figured out easily. Their offense will be a lot more of a handful. Defensively, a little bit worried about them, but, it's not as terrifying as before. Letting Calais Campbell go was probably more because of money and, wanting to go
Hmm.
younger. David Ajabo, who I wanted Cleveland to draft, he's going to get a chance to show out. I'm really excited to see how he looks, but it's got to be Baltimore. Respect to Cincinnati, even though I feel that Baltimore the past two seasons, injuries derailed them from winning this division, but it's got to be Baltimore because I think that's a team that Cleveland has struggled with. When it comes to Cincinnati, Cleveland had their issues with Cincinnati. The Halloween game, it was close at first, and Cleveland made the necessary adjustments, and they, pretty much beat them down on national television. The second game at Cincinnati, I thought both Watson and Burrow were pretty much mid the entire game. It was a close game throughout, but the Browns defense folded like they did multiple times throughout the year. But if it's one team that I'm more confident in that Cleveland will struggle with, it's got to be Baltimore. When healthy, Lamar is one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in this league. You have that running game with J.K. and Gus Edwards. That's going to be a problem. And, this is a team that has some unfortunate injury luck. I got to go with Baltimore. Much respect to Cincinnati, but I'm more fearful of a Lamar Jackson, a fully healthy Lamar Jackson, and a competent offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, than Cincinnati. So, that's me.
That's fair.
Damn, I really got to stop following Curtis because Curtis is burying me right now. But no, he's right, dude. The Ravens are like if Todd Monken is serious about like committing to the past, that is a very scary prospect for Browns fans. Like I am beyond huge on Zay Flowers. I love Zay Flowers. I think he's phenomenal. I love Rashad Bateman. I think he's just been like kind of cooking, waiting for his chance. And obviously Mark Andrews is a top 3 tight end in the league. And then last year, you mentioned it with David Ajabo, they nailed their draft. I could look back and try to find something, but like looking at how they ended up getting Kyle Hamilton somehow, like the Ravens just end up having these players fall into their laps, like Kyle Hamilton. I'm blanking for the life of me on the center they ended up drafting
Linderbaum.
Tyler Linderbaum, who became like a top center in the league. Like everything they're doing is like trending in the right direction. And I'm not afraid of the Bengals, but like he said, we have done such a good job like beating them and containing them and doing what we had to do to get wins against the Bengals, and honestly making Joe look bad like for a couple times a year was great. But the Ravens are always going to give us trouble. They're always going to play us hard, and they're only getting better. I am horrified of what the Ravens can do, but I still think we stand a fighting chance against them. I still think it's a 50-50 game.
No thoughts on Pittsburgh?
I am, like I said, negative. I'm negative afraid of Pittsburgh.
It's just mid. Their offense is just mid. The defense, yeah, it's going to be terrifying, but a wide receiver trio of Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Allen Robinson, who kind of looked like he's on his last leg a little bit. I'm not losing sleep over that. Like, stop it. Like, that's not scaring me anytime soon. And Matt Canada's still there, so
Yeah, Matt Canada is still there. Yeah.
Notice how the Ravens fired Greg Roman and they replaced him with Tom Monken. Cleveland fired Joe Woods and they replaced him with Jim Schwartz. Steelers chose to keep Matt Canada.
Yeah,
those teams are built different.
Yeah, and not to get too off topic and into the Steelers, but it's so funny because I've almost seen Steelers fans gaslight themselves into thinking keeping Canada was a good idea. And the main reason for that is because they think throwing Kenny Pickett into a new offense in year 2 is a really bad idea. When what's going to happen is Kenny Pickett's going to look okay this year, because I think Kenny Pickett's fine. And then you're going to hire a new offensive coordinator next year. And then Kenny Pickett is going to have to learn a new offense in year 3, when a lot of quarterbacks really have that big breakout rather than learning it in year 2 and then being able to build upon it in year 3. So it's tough. I don't like the Steelers, but I do like Kenny Pickett and I'm rooting for him. So I feel really bad for the situation he's in, because Matt Canada, in my humble opinion, was worse than Greg Roman. I know that might be a bit taboo to say, but at least Greg Roman knew how to run the football. At least he brought something to the table. What does Matt Canada bring to the table? Jet sweeps? Like, that's it.
It's just uncreative. It's just bad. It's just, I watched one game when Matt Canada was calling plays. I'm like, why did they keep him? Like, it's just
I get them being the team kind of on the bottom rung of the ladder there, but I'm a little surprised by the dismissal of Cincinnati. Like, you guys didn't completely dismiss them, but still Cincinnati. They've got what I think is the second best quarterback in football. They've got a great wide receiver room. Defense is fantastic. Like, I think at the very least, this division is going to be a 3-way bloodbath. I think Pittsburgh will also throw their hat into the ring, because Pittsburgh always finds a way to be competitive. But there are 3 teams in this league legitimately that, you could come from the future 8 months from now and say, hey, the Browns won the Super Bowl, the Bengals won the Super Bowl, or the Ravens won the Super Bowl. And I wouldn't be that shocked, because they're all really good fucking football teams.
The hard thing I'll say, and I think you're right about it, is like at some point, one of those 3, like, we're going to cannibalize ourselves, and like, no idea who it'll be, but like just trying to outplay each other. one of the three is going to fall apart. And like you said, all three, you're right, could be Super Bowl like contenders. But it's not going to happen because we play each other twice a year.
Yeah.
When you play each other twice a year, you get to essentially know what they're doing. It feels I respect Cincinnati, but do I really trust Joe Burrow to carry a team to the Super Bowl and win it? Because I wrote an article about this saying he's been an average postseason quarterback, and people are saying, "Oh, you're just hating." I'm like, I'm not hating. He got carried the first time in his first postseason run with Cincinnati. The second time, it's the same thing. He was okay in the wild card game, really great in the divisional game. AFC title game, thought he was okay, dare I say below average, but I respect Cincinnati because of the talent that they possess, but it's just I need Joe Burrow to like do more in the postseason, not just rely on your defense and rely on the special teams to bail you out. Because people have this notion that he's, clutch when it matters in the postseason. He's not. His EPA in the fourth quarter is in the realm of Zach Wilson's EPA career per play. It's that bad. That's the only thing that concerns me. They're a talented team, but I don't think they really scare Cleveland. I fear Baltimore more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's valid. I don't necessarily disagree that Baltimore is the team that's going to give Cleveland more of a fit than Cincinnati. It's just I can't bring myself to ever count out Cincinnati. Like I said, I think Joe Burrow is the second best quarterback in football. So it's tough for me to hear you guys, or not tough, surprising for me to hear you guys be like, yeah, it's kind of whatever, props to him, but whatever. But that being said, to kind of wrap us up, the last question I have kind of a two-parter. What are your expectations for this season record-wise? You can either give me a flat prediction, a range, a ceiling, floor, whatever you want to do. And then the second part is what player are you most excited to watch? And you can't say Myles Garrett because that's a cop-out answer because he is by far and away the best player on this team.
For me, it's 10-6 with a wild card berth, or maybe 10 plus wins or 11 plus wins. A wild card berth, you go from there. I do think there are some games that could be trap games that they go in that they're favored and they end up screwing up and losing. I think there are a couple games on that schedule. The Seattle game, that might be a game they might lose, in my opinion. But 11 wins or 10 wins, maybe you finish second in the division, maybe third with a winning record. You're a wild card team, and then you go from there. I don't have these unrealistic expectations for this team. I just think they'll be a playoff team. Super Bowl, no. Like, shut it down, please. Just get to the wild card round, get to the playoffs, and go from there. If you can win the wild card round and you go on and do whatever you can, then I'll take it a little bit seriously. But they just got to get to the playoffs. No, put the carpet for the horse. You don't have to go with Super Bowl automatically. Just get to the postseason, handle your business in the division, and go from there. And that's where I'm at.
Man, I'm way more unrealistic than you. I'm putting him in like the 12 win range. Like 12, I think 12 wins is a solid number for what this team can do. I do think there are games they could play down to, but this might just be orange tinted glasses, but I'm looking at this schedule and I'm very excited about what we're facing.
The games that I'm worried about, though, I'm pulling up the schedule right now because the first three games are going to dictate how the season goes. If you go 3-0 in those games, which I don't think they could, but I've seen stranger things happen before. But if you go 3-0 in those games, maybe sky's the limit. But if you go 2-1, that's fine. If you go 1-2, like, you can't go 1-2 when you have the stacked division. But I'm looking at their schedule right now, week 4 through 8. Tell me if they're going to be. They're home against Baltimore. They have a bye. Home against the 49ers. At Colts. At Seattle. They can beat the Cardinals, though. But Ravens, 49ers. Yeah, if you don't beat the Cardinals, that's not good. But
I'd lump the Colts in with
Ravens,
that too. By the way, I think y'all should beat the Colts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ideally.
Yeah, but Ravens, 49ers, Colts, Seahawks, I see what? Maybe you go what? You split with the Ravens. You beat the Ravens.
For sure split the Ravens.
You you win against the Ravens, you lose against the 49ers coming off a bye week. At the Colts, that game is probably closer than expected. Seattle might be a bit of a trap game because that wide receiver trio of JSN, DK, Tyler Lockett, plus you're playing in Seattle, which, that place is pretty loud, even though people have beaten them a couple years, but that's not going to be easy. But the back half of their schedule, they can beat the Texans. Jets might be a little bit of a playoff preview potentially. You got the Bears on the schedule. You got Jacksonville. You got the Rams, Broncos, Steelers. I see 10 or 11 wins. I don't think putting 12 wins is 12 wins could happen, but 10, 11 wins, that's fine with me.
I'm not
That's
trying to
fair.
write off. I'm not trying to write off the Seahawks in that case. I do think we split the Ravens in that stretch, but I think the Seahawks are a very good young team and they're rising up. But looking at I also think the 49ers are about to be ass deep in a quarterback controversy because they have
Oh my
three
God,
people
yeah.
that they just don't know what they're gonna do with.
That
Trey Lance
Niners
doesn't.
quarterback situation, I could make a whole video about that in itself. It's tough.
You're welcome. I'm not a big Purdy guy, but even
I'm
looking
not
ahead,
either.
what they have before us, they play the Steelers, they play the Rams, which should be a wash, but you never really know. They play the Giants, the Cardinals, wash, the Cowboys, and then they face us the week after the Cowboys. I don't think the 49ers have a cakewalk on their way to us. I think that's a winnable game.
For sure. Definitely
It's
possible.
tough, but it's winnable.
Mm-hmm. Especially if they don't know what's going on at quarterback. Absolutely. It's winnable without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
49ers Browns, that should have been, I don't know who's broadcasting the game. Maybe Fox, I think. They could have made that a
I think that's a
late
1
game.
o'clock. I just looked at that too.
Really?
That's a 1 o'clock game.
Interesting.
Well, I
That's
hope
gotta
it's a 1 o'clock game, but the Browns offensive line against the 49ers defensive line will be cinema. Too bad
Oh,
they couldn't replace that.
absolutely. Oh my God, I can't wait.
Curious who
The
will
two
call that game, though. I don't want a announcer group that mispronounces the names, but it happens more times than not.
Yeah,
Facts.
for sure. And then the second part of that question, who are you guys most excited to watch, player-wise?
It's got to be Greg Newsome for me, because last season,
Okay.
people have this, notion about Greg. Oh, if he's so talented, then how come he doesn't have any receptions? Just stop. It doesn't matter about that. He's a talented young player that I think could really be really great this season. He was not playing in the right position. He admitted it. He didn't want to play in the slot. He rather played, opposite of Denzel Ward, which is fine, but it's got to be Greg Newsome for me because I feel like he's just primed for a breakout season. Got a lot of stock in Greg Newsome.
It is a good season, especially after the conversations they had internally last year, which we thought I thought we were gonna lose Greg Newsome. I gotta say, for me, it's Elijah Moore, man. I think he just has such a fat chip on his shoulder after all the Jets trash and all that stuff. I think he's just gonna come out with a fire under his ass and just burn the world down. I also think we played a very volatile game last year, just relying on Amari Cooper and him staying healthy. So I think now that there's a true second option, not dissing DPJ because I love DPJ, but now there's a true second option and he is a speedy wide receiver that kind of, I guess, on a lesser scale could give you that Will Fuller connection that Watson had for a little bit.
Yeah, they're gaining that connection.
I'm sorry. Go.
Yeah, they're gaining that connection from what I've been reading. But I think Elijah Moore is primed for a breakout year because last season he was in an offense that didn't utilize him right, and he had Zach Wilson and Mike White and Winnipeg Blue Bomber Chris Streveler throwing him the ball, and he was just frustrated. Yeah, I watch CFL. I don't know, just because the NFL isn't there. I gotta watch something.
This guy's a football freak. I love it.
I mean, CFL is not bad. I mean, there's some players that could be coming to the NFL soon. I don't know who though, but there's one that's with the Jaguars right now. But he just had a rough deal in New York and he wanted out, and Jets fans didn't like that. I'm like, well, I'd be frustrated too if I had to deal with an offense that did utilize me properly and a quarterback situation that was in flux. So when they traded him to Cleveland, I'm like, oh, I didn't know Cleveland was going to trade him. But I think that in a new place, I think he'll be more focused. I think he's primed. He's primed. I think he's just itching to just get a chance to prove that he wasn't the problem. It was the quarterback's problem in New York. So I got to go with him. He's primed. I think it's possible.
Yeah. See, I'm going to go with the boring, like old school Miller football answer. There's no fullback I can pick, so I'm just going to pick the two guards that essentially run around like they're fullbacks and light people up. Bitonio and Teller, two of my favorite players in the league, one of the most dynamic duos in football. I know it's kind of taboo to say in the year 2023 that my favorite thing about this team is their run game, and I know I already said that. I don't care. I'm going to repeat myself because it's my goddamn show. It's just so entertaining to watch these two play. And like I said earlier, the offense does not function the way it does if these two aren't at the top of their game. So you have two elite guards that are not only great run blockers, but also can hold their own in pass protection as well, to say the very least. I think they're awesome. I can't wait to watch them. Those two, and then Dalvin Tomlinson. I'm super, super excited to see what they're going to do for sure. But there's a lot of exciting stuff going on with the Browns. Like I said, I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about it. I feel like this is a team that's kind of flying under the radar for whatever reason. But it's definitely a team worth watching this year. They're going to be must-see TV, in my opinion. But with all that being said, I think that about wraps us up here. If you guys want to plug anything, go ahead. The floor is yours. Whatever you want to plug, I'll make sure to throw it in the description down below.
Yeah, my Twitter is Curtis_Brown21. I also write articles for the Right Way Sports Network, if you've heard of that before. So, I write articles. I'm pretty much a journalist in some areas. And also I cover the Browns as well, just recently with Dogs by Nature. So I got two jobs covering, both the Browns and TWSN. So go follow me on those.
And for me, you can find me everywhere at BOTA Sports, Instagram, not Twitter. I'm going to be honest with you. TikTok, YouTube. We do a weekly podcast, 7:00 on Wednesdays, if you want to come in and hang out.
Yeah. James, you're the only person I know that does this content thing and takes Instagram more seriously than Twitter. And I respect it given the current state of Twitter, but that's fantastic. I love it.
Okay. So I've tried taking Twitter seriously, and I posted something like some stat clip that I was doing for a while, and I fucking hated it. It was boring. But it was a Michael Thomas, some Michael Thomas stat. And man, I misidentified. I was like, oh, well, I didn't realize it was running a slant in this. And I misidentified how many steps he was taking in the clip. And bro, I got torn apart.
Oh yeah,
by
Twitter
so
sucks.
many Saints fans. And I'm like, I hate this. This sucks. I'm done.
Yeah,
I got called so many things. It was absurd.
Yeah, no, it's great. That's why this is going to sound like some bitch shit, but that's why my profile picture on Twitter isn't me now. It's me when I was a little kid. Because the last thing I need is to make a comment about someone and someone to be like, your eyes are uneven, your nose is too big, your beard is unkempt, and your freckles are too, you have too many freckles or some shit, and have to deal with that. Twitter's crazy.
And stuff. It's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But like I said, these two gentlemen's links will be in the description down below, along with Phones' Twitter, which you should not follow. Do not follow it under any circumstances. But you can follow all of my links, which will also be down in the description below. My podcast, Run the North. Despite the name, we talk about the entirety of the NFL and even other sports. We post every Friday. And then, of course, my Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff will be in the description. And there should be a link to the playlist with all of the team previews in it. I don't know which one's coming next. I have aired these horribly out of order because scheduling is hard, especially when I'm scheduling with over 60 people throughout the summer. It's tough. But I'm getting them all out this year. I didn't get to do the 49ers last year because scheduling fell apart. My 49ers fan bailed on me, but we'll get it done. We'll get it figured out. It's been a ton of fun. We got some great guests coming up. So if you want to check any of that out, definitely make sure to do so. And don't forget to subscribe. God, I can't talk. We need to end this. Don't forget to subscribe down below. Helps me out a ton. Shows that you care about what's going on. Same thing with dropping a like. Make sure to comment down below what you think's going on with the Browns, what your opinions are. If we're too high on somebody, too low, we skipped over somebody you think deserves attention, by all means. I don't think we mentioned David Njoku. He is really good at tight ending. So throwing that out there.
That's wild. That is wild. We just skipped over the Chiefs.
Yeah. Cole Kmet's
bad.
better, but that's neither here nor there. But all that being said, to the two gentlemen joining me, phones, wherever he is out in the multiverse, and of course, everyone out there watching, I hope you all have a wonderful day, evening, night, afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you. I hope you enjoy it because you're all wonderful people and you deserve it.